We are live. Again, I am trying to figure out where the live link is to paste over here, but I think anyone who's heading to the main page might find it. I see one person's here. Let me see. I know there's an easier way to do this, and if someone out there knows of the easier way to do this, than me just, me just copying, pasting the link back to the last post. There we go. Then let me know, because the schedule thing is not working on YouTube for me, and I know it's user error because it can't be them, right? So I'm gonna let some people head in this direction. Hi everyone, there's the link right there. Let's put the link in the regular comments too, in case anyone's showing up late. Okay, there we go. Hi, okay, there's a few people who've made it over, that's good. Welcome again to another Sunday Live Q&A. I am going to make sure I'm on the right page so I can see your comments and questions. Hopefully I have all of the technical stuff figured out this round. I had my dad's desktop hardwired into the Ethernet router, and I think that was sucking bandwidth. So we'll see. Hopefully it'll work out. We won't get the jumping around like we did last week. And I don't have to upgrade internet this soon. But yeah, we'll see what happens. There we go. So you guys got notifications. That's great. Yeah, if you have liked, subscribed, hit the bell that makes you follow and get notifications, then that should help you figure out where to find the live stream. It'll give you the link, and then I don't have to paste it all. As always, I've done a question roundup from various sources, so I do it on Patreon, dedicated questions there, as well as I do on the day before on Instagram, and occasionally pop some stuff up on Facebook, and we get some questions going here. You can also ask questions in the live chat, and if you have a question that's really, really important, and you're looking at your live chat window right now, you'll see the thing that looks like a little $sign next to the smiley face where you can choose emojis. That $sign will help push your question to the top. I will see it, it'll get highlighted, you'll get a shout out. So feel free, if you have something that's just like a burning question, to use the super chat. I do really appreciate it. We have lots of trees that need to be purchased for the food forest that I'm planting, so all of contributions that I get basically go back into the farm, so that we can continue exploring this space. So hi everyone. I'm just going to look through this, and I'm going to actually start with some of the questions that came up in chat. If you were in the live chat for the seed saving video that just premiered, we're going to start with some of those questions because you guys are here. So let's do that. So one of the things was, what parameters are you looking at when you're saving or selecting seeds to save? And is it like choosing specific plants or what? So kind of go over that. Yes, it is choosing specific plants. What I'm looking for, and it's a variety of things, but it is the plant health, it's pest and disease tolerance, if it's doing really well. A lot of times it'll be whatever produces earliest. So like I said with the peppers, I will pick ones that are ripe sooner because I'm trying to get those day lengths down on everything. And a lot of the seeds I'm starting to work with are landrace crops, which other humans have selected for hundreds of years to be in that like 60 day and 50 day and lower spots. Thank you, John, for sending me a couple of bucks to buy some trees. I love it. They'll actually buy, I think, like 3 trees from one of the places I'm ordering. So they're little whips, but that's exciting. So I'll select basically based on if I can harvest early, to try and get that day length down like I was saying. If something is really drought tolerant, pest tolerant, disease tolerant, if there's one plant that stands out on all of the ones that I've planted, then I'll more than likely save from that one. You don't want to save necessarily anything that's like getting destroyed by insects or getting plagued by diseases or is not, it's just not like a higher functioning plant. So if it's having a lot of trouble, I don't tend to save those seeds from those plants. I may try and get seeds from somewhere else next year and start over, unless it's something that I really want, like that. I'm looking for the kind of the specs as far as shape and size and flavor. If something's awesome, I save it. And if something is questionable, then I don't. And again, like with the cross-pollination conversation, if I think that it might have crossed, I might save it, but I know that I'm not going to potentially get the same plant the following year. So there's a lot of things to keep in mind. I should do a write-up on this, to be honest, because as we get deeper into discussing landrace plants, I do think it's important that we all know, what we're looking for, so that we can help create a much bigger seed bank, like collectively, and we're not relying on, just one that's stashed off in melting ice somewhere. So, let's see. Another one from that chat was, how long do seeds remain viable? So that really depends on the seed, and it depends on your storage method. I've typically gotten anywhere between 3 to 7 years. I think my oldest seeds are like in the neighborhood of 10, and a lot of those are still viable, but I did store them in airtight containers in cool, dark places. If you're storing something in an envelope and it has exposure to light and it's just kind of sitting out like a seed pack, then you could look at getting a couple of years. I've heard stories where people get 5 or 10 years from those, but just know, like, the more environment that it's exposed to, the less viability it can potentially have those particular seeds that are not stored as well. So we're looking at doing really good long-term storage. I know the people who are running seed banks, a lot of them will store, their catalog collection, in addition to what they have in jars, in a cool location in their house. They'll have a deep freeze that doesn't cycle on and off, so it's not going through the freeze-thaw cycle, that they'll store seeds in, so that those seeds are really long-term viable. But so there's, like, again, like anything else, it depends situation. So yeah, that's how that works out. I'm gonna take a question from this chat. So Possum says that they planted sweet corn, only got to about 5 feet tall, and then the ears only got to 3 to 5 inches long, and it quit growing. Why is that? So I have not grown a ton of corn in my life, but there's a number of reasons. One, I'm growing corn that only gets to 5 feet tall to begin with. My flower corn only gets that tall. If it's not part of the variety as far as what you're working with, if it's not a known trait or characteristic of that variety, what could be happening is maybe an irrigation thing. If it's not getting, the consistent amount of water. I noticed that ours stalled out at a certain point, and part of it was the variety, part of it was the fact, I think, that it got warm enough and the day length got long enough that the corn switched gears and was like, okay, well, let's pollinate and make ears because of these factors. So every seed sort of has like these built-in mechanics that the day length, a lot of times, as far as like light cycles and whatnot, will indicate to that plant, like, this is reproductive phase, or this is growth phase, or this is, so it is a lot of like what you're feeding it and how you're amending your soil, or if you're doing like drenches and sprays and whatnot, but part of it too is just the environmental factors. So I'm trying to figure out like better ways for us to consider when to plant, not just based on frost, but also all of these other factors, and working on that one. So I'll get back to you. But yeah, like the weather changes are definitely big. The minute we stopped getting frequent rain here, I noticed that with my corn this season, was the minute that it just decided to top out. So that's sort of, how that worked out. Let's see. Thank you, Root Chino. I love that you're here learning with us. Of course, if anyone ever has stuff to add, and help each other out in the comments with answering questions, because sometimes they fly by. But thank you so much. Even people who don't have gardens, who love learning, like, that just makes me so happy, because I think that the more knowledge that we have collectively and that we share, the better off everyone is, because if we need to grow, then at least we feel a little more confident to try and do that, even if it's just, in a pot or on a balcony or in a yard or wherever. Like, if you can find a spot and, test it out and get your hands dirty and your feet wet, so to speak, then I love that. Yeah, thank you so much. that will buy a couple of trees. I think there were some questions that got scrolled up, so I hope that I didn't miss anything too important. I have added Look and See on Netflix to my queue. I actually started building a queue because I added my dad to the accounts, and now he's using my account. I'm using my queue instead of looking at his, because I'm adding lots of documentaries and stuff. And so we're learning about regenerative agriculture together, which is really cool because it's a lot. I think it's a lot better sometimes to have, the professionals that have been in the field for a long time explaining the basis of this to everyone versus me being like, well, it's kind of like this and that, and can't find all the right words, but like makes sense up here, just not right here. Yeah, so one of the other questions that came from that chat, and then we'll move into the Instagram questions, was, are you still planning on mentoring at your farm? Yes, I am. At some point, we are going to do a work day that hopefully involves digging some holes for trees. But beyond that, yeah, like I'm trying to figure out sort of a curriculum schedule now that we're starting to get a plan in place for the field and for the forest. I didn't want to do any sort of mentoring or classes or group work without it, without having sort of a strategy in place. And so as we move forward, and those will be announced, with enough time ahead of time. But yeah, we will be doing farm dinners. We will be doing, work days and group mentoring. I'm open to doing some individual or small group projects as well if anyone is looking for that. But I really just wanted to observe this first season, get a feel for the space, and then decide based on that what sort of infrastructure stuff we need to work with in it, rather than just fumbling about like a crazy person with a bunch of people here. So stay tuned for that. Yeah, so this following weekend, Mason just asked, your conference is coming up this week. I am going to a farm conference, and I knew I should have written the name down because it's slipped. Yeah, there's a farm conference that's coming up in Central Texas, and I will be there because there's lots of people I want to see and listen to and learn from. So we will not do a Q&A next Sunday, but I will hopefully I'll be doing a little bit of live stuff. Maybe not here because I'm not sure what the Wi-Fi is going to be like there, but definitely on stories, on Instagram, on Facebook, on Patreon. So there'll be, the highlights of that sort of stuff popping up. Oh, so one of the things that I wanted to, because a few of you guys had asked about carrots and dill seeds, and they're all tangled up now, but I actually had some fennel seeds here that I was going to show you. So this is, I don't even know if that's going to focus, but so this is the fennel seeds I pulled off of some fennel that I had transplanted into the woods, way back when, at the beginning of the year. And so with fennel, with dill, with carrots, depending on the varieties that you have, they take a little while to go to seed, but they're my favorite plants to have in every corner of the garden because the flowers on them, the umbels, those big upside down umbrella looking flower heads, they attract so many beneficial insects and so many pollinators. So I just let them flower, and then if you let them keep going beyond the flowers, then they eventually form a little thing of seed heads like this, and they'll come out, kind of green, and they're nice to use at that phase if you're in the culinary space. As far as the dill and fennel go, I like them green, but if you let them keep going, then they're brown, and then you get to decide, do I want to eat this or plant it? And if you don't remove them, then you're going to have it all over your yard or garden, which isn't such a bad thing. But yeah, just let it keep going. I mean, with carrots, the seeds are going to look very similar. The carrots ones feel a little more like Velcro on the outside. That's the only way I can explain it. But I definitely recommend letting at least a few go to seed. With dill, the plant tends to go with it in my experience. With fennel, a lot of times you can cut the seed heads off and the base will keep going. I've had the same experience with celery. And carrots just, that's one and done situation for the most part. So, yeah, let's see. Am I going to plant any bamboo? So I am considering it. We'd have to plant clumping bamboo here, just because I'm a little bit nervous about it taking over, but it is one of the things that I'm considering. It's funny because like all of the things I'm considering for windscreens are kind of invasive, or they can be like fall in the invasive category if they're not managed well. But bamboo, the clumping variety I'm considering. Another one is they call it horse apple here. I think it's Osage orange, and then it has another name. And then some people call it Bodark. I think Bodark is like the local name, which I had no idea what they were talking about when everyone's like, oh, you should carve some Bodark trees, like carve that into spoons. I'm like, I don't know what Bodark is. It's like, oh, it's the horse apples. So there's a couple of things, but bamboo is in there partially because of the edible nature, partially because of building material, good biomass, decent for biochar, like good for microbes. There's a lot of reasons, so it's on my list for sure. Let's see. I can have some of your avocados. Yeah, I'll take some avocados. I'm pretty sure that you probably live too far away though, Mike, if you're growing avocados. But you know, if you want to send some to my P.O. box, I'm not opposed to that. I'm spending way too much on avocados right now because my tree is very small and not growing any. So, yeah. Let's see. Questions about lemons. Like I had mentioned before, MP, the citrus in the Northern Hemisphere, for the most part, ripens between December and February. That was my experience living in California, is that it blooms kind of, you know, later in the spring and then grows throughout the summer and then ripens in the winter. And so if you're having citrus shortages where you're at, it's likely that the stockpile is getting low wherever they're getting it from, and they're not getting more, and there could be all sort of like tariff issues around that too, just like some other produce. But yeah, growing your own would be the best way to do it because you can keep citrus on the tree for a lot longer than you can keep it off the tree. So yeah. Yeah, I think, Jesse, that's why they called it Bodark, actually. That was one of the interesting facts I was reading about the Osage orange trees, and apparently has really bad thorns too. But yeah, it's one of those things that's supposed to be really strong wood and can potentially, you know, bust up any blades and chainsaws and whatnot that you have and like dull everything really quickly. But I like the idea of it as far as I want living fences. I don't want things that I have to, you know, manage without getting something out of that management process. So definitely heading in that direction. The overturned root chino, the overturned glass bottles of water in the woods. So those are working out really well. I definitely am a bigger fan of the wine bottles than I am of the beer or soda bottles just because of volume issues. So as the soil becomes saturated, it will the wine bottles have shown like it comes out a lot more slowly out of the bottle, and I'm replacing them every 2, 3, even 4 days depending on how hot it is, versus the beer and soda bottles are like every day or so. And then there's these like really big 1.5 liter sherry bottles that are coming out of the kitchen where my dad works, and those are awesome because that's like potentially a week once the soil is saturated enough. Like I can just leave that bottle in there, or you know, put it on a tree or something. So I think they're working out really well. I actually have to go refill them and continue working on irrigation stuff after we're done with this. But I definitely like filling a crate of bottles and then putting them throughout the woods rather than carrying water in cans or hoses and feeling like I'm not getting water to the root of the plants. At first I thought you were talking, when I saw overturned bottles, I thought you were talking about my my pepper experiment with the aloe. And I kind of don't want to show you guys, but I'm going to because it's really gross. So I had the brilliant idea that I was going to just add water to the bottom of the bowl to try and like keep the humidity up. And I can't leave well enough alone ever. So this is what we're dealing with right now. I guess I should take the top off. It is nasty. It smells bad. I gotta clean it out. But it's like this gross, I can't even. It's like this gross, moldy, dead mess right now. So I don't recommend putting water under it, I suppose. But I'll give it another shot, you know. I'm not sure that this, it's all stuck. I'm not sure that this propagation hack is working out. But I'm going to give it another shot without messing with that too much. Yeah, so I put water in the bottom, and then I shoved the aloe down so that it could maybe suck up more water. And it's just, oh, it's foul. It's real gross. But that's why we do these experiments and try and learn from them and figure out, you know, versus I just saw a picture of it online and no one had like a step-by-step process. So I'm troubleshooting it in all the wrong ways so you don't have to. Yeah. So, oh yeah, it might be illegal to send avocados in the mail, huh? Well, that's a bummer. Does anyone here eat persimmons? I eat persimmons. I'm actually growing native ones, which are only possible to eat unless they're perfectly ripe. But if you don't like the flavor of persimmons, I recommend getting the oh, I never remember the name of them now. They're the little squat, like pumpkin-looking ones. I think they're like hachia, maybe, or that might be the other one. It's either fuyu or hachia. I always get them confused. But don't plant the wild ones if you don't like persimmons, because they're, I mean, the flavor is delicious when they're ripe. Like, let's be honest, it's the best baking spice flavor I've ever tasted in a persimmon. Yeah, so like the fuyu. Thank you, Josh, for that one. I always just get those confused. So, don't add water, the bottle keeps enough moisture. Yeah, Paul, you're probably right on that one. Like I said, I'm not good at leaving well enough alone. So, I like having persimmons. I don't know if you live in a place that you can have an avocado, then it's also worth having one. I'm risking it on the avocado, so we'll see, fingers crossed. So I'm going to flip through some of these Instagram questions now. Yeah, aloe doesn't like water, Jesse, as I found out. I don't water the plants I have too often, but I kind of just, I think, expected it to act sort of like a straw, like any other cut thing would, and it just got rotten instead. So we'll give that one another shot. Instagram questions. Is there a story behind Washtub Creek? So for those of you guys who have seen it pop up in videos, or if you're on Instagram and you see it in my stories fairly frequently, especially when I'm covering my little avocado tree, I don't know what the story is. I know that my dad wanted to have a water feature to sit next to in the morning or with a cup of coffee, or in the afternoon with a beer and watch the birds, you know, play in the water and just have something that was peaceful sounding in the background. And I think that he just kind of did the tongue-in-cheek thing where it's like we have this big livestock tank as the water basin and the water's flowing down that, and so it looks like someplace that you'd wash your clothes. And I could be making all of this up, but I'm pretty sure that's kind of like what the thought process was, and he was just being cheeky, naming it Washtub Creek. I happen to love it because it's just nice to have the water getting under the liner and then pushing the basin out of place, so then the water is not going into it. So if anyone's dealt with this before, like, feel free to ping me or hit the contact button on the main page, and if you can help me sort it out, because it's gotten to the point of where it's like immense frustration and I really want it to work right. So let's see. Yeah, I'm constitutional nationalist. I'm really digging the Yopon tea. That is one of those words that I see and it doesn't sound right in my head. I have a Yopon bush in the nursery, and there's actually some friends that are down in Austin that grow and roast and all of that, and it is delicious. So I'm definitely looking forward to, I think I have to grow this plant for a little while because I got it from a big box store. But I'm definitely looking forward to doing all of that as well, in case I ever have to replace coffee for any reason. It'd be nice to still have a solid source of caffeine. As you can see, I have an addiction. So, yeah, it is, I'm a fan of that. Is everyone still here? I feel like this, yeah, okay. It's just the laptop timing out, not the live feed. Let's take another one of these guys. How old can a hot pepper be and still be productive? This is totally a question for, there's a few friends where this would be a good question, but in my experience, I've had one, let's see, I had a, what is it? It was a black cobra pepper, and was it the cobra? Yeah, I think it was the cobra, and it was 5-6 years old in the ground, zone 9B. So, for those of you who are thinking to keep it in the ground, it might be better in a pot if you're trying to get multiple seasons out of it. But it was still super, super productive. It was actually most productive in year 3. So yeah, it was one of those things that it kind of does depend on the variety. I found things that are more on the like Manzano side tend to live a little bit longer, or like the wilder peppers. Like I have a friend who has an Amashito pepper that I think he said was like 4 or 5 years old now. So with the super hots, with like the more tropical and subtropical peppers, I have found that they kind of melt down after 2 or 3 years. But there are people out there that keep them alive longer. So I'm sure there's plenty of tips all over YouTube and the rest of the internet to keep your peppers alive as long as possible. I tend to not baby them through the winter, and so sometimes the roots will get rotten or frozen in greenhouses that aren't heated. But it basically can be kept alive and productive for a couple of years, I would say. Most of them can. Yeah. Zone 6B, St. Louis. Thoughts on a fall crop of snow peas? I think that it's a good idea to do a fall crop of snow peas. I don't know. Yeah, if you have that's the biggest issue, is how heat sensitive they are. One of the things you could do is when you see your temperature start going down, that's when you plant, if you don't think you're going to have any more heat waves. And then figure out some sort of cover for them. So whether it's a cold frame or row cover or something, just to kind of extend out your season into those early frost days. Because, I mean, it's hard to say like that the weather won't get crazy and won't get a crazy cold snap right after those first frost dates. But a lot of times, most of us will get another month or 2 before we get the really hard freezes that are going to kill everything off. If you have the space and ability to do a cold frame or to do row covers or something for the peas that you want to plant, then I think that that's worth pursuing. And you can also squeeze in, your other winter greens and veggies in there too. Yeah. Do I have Portuguese origins? No, I don't think so. I'm a big mutt. Like, let's be honest. I'm Mexican, Italian, and Spanish, and Scotch-Irish, and Canary Islander. Like, there's like this really long, complicated mutt family tree. But yeah, that's basically that background there. It is kind of a Portuguese name, huh? Let's see. 9B is pretty cool, but just outside of yeah, it's true. I'm so jealous of people who live in zone 10 sometimes, because they can just grow anything. They're like, I don't see what the problem is. Why don't more people grow all of these things? And you're like, because we have winter. So it was good to kind of ease into that. And I still can't complain because I'm in zone 8. So we get freezes, but I can kind of, fudge the edges of what I can and can't plant. That being said, we don't get, or cool enough summers to grow a lot of the things that you can in like the Northeast or Northwest. So that's the trade-off. Like, being the middle child is maybe not very much fun. Let's see. Do I have PayPal for donations during live streams? I do not, but that's a great idea. I should do something like that. I do have Venmo. I don't have anything up here. And I don't know how to share it right this second. But I'll figure something out for the next live stream. For anyone who doesn't want to do Super Chat. There's also Patreon. They do take a chunk. So if that's something that you're interested in, then I will figure that out. Thanks, Mason, for bringing that up. We plant in the lower rows of road garden, sprinkled soil over the top. Wonder if rich mulch would serve the same purpose. Home Depot has 3 bags for $14. So, Jamie, that's a great question. I would say, so it depends on, let's see. There's a mulch. It's a compost, but it's a mulch that I buy at Lowe's here. And I buy it as a mulch, even though it's sold as compost. And it's less than $4 a bag. But I really like to use it as the mulch on the bottom of the planting holes, because it has mycorrhizal fungi in the mulch itself. So if you have access to one that's a really good one, that's not huge chunks, that looks like it's decomposed, that smells you know, like the forest floor, that's made of local products, and you're going to be able to get a good price for it. I'd say like get some and test it out. Like the one that I'm able to get here works really well for me. So I wouldn't do, you know, my entire garden with it without trying to, like, just testing it out first. But if you're on Instagram, you could actually see in my stories from yesterday, and maybe I'll create a little story for like all of my soil stuff as well, that that mulch was one of the things I've been using on my tomatillos and a lot of things that I've transplanted from the field to various gardens, because I'm gone at the end of this week and then I'm gone later in the month and the field's not going to get any water. So I'm moving things to try and still get some production out of them and not have them just die out there by themselves. And one of the things I noticed, this story has a point, one of the things I noticed in working with that mulch is that these plants are having just like the most phenomenal root systems for growing in native soil that's really compacted clay. And they're getting like lots of tiny fibrous feeder roots. The tap roots are there, but they're not like, you know, super extreme all over the place. And they've been very easy to transplant, and I don't actually see any transplant shock. And I think part of that is because of the bagged components that I found to use that had biology in them and not just food. So if that's something you have access to, then I'd say test it out and potentially go for it, because it could be worth a shot and it could save you a few dollars. Yeah. Sorry that took a long time. Ralph, please don't send cash in the mail. I appreciate cash, but PayPal would be better. Just because I don't know about the post office, and like, it exchanges a lot of hands. So send, you know, things that are legal and not disgusting in the mail, and anything else, I'll set something up. I did not see your question. Whoever's saying answer me, please. Again, there is a super chat button at the bottom. So if you have a really important question, and as these messages are scrolling by, feel free to super chat it, and I'll stop what I'm doing and get to it. So, let's see. How do you get going in the Korean natural farming stuff for a beginner? So we're going to be getting back into the Korean natural farming stuff here shortly. I was waiting for it to cool off, as I think I mentioned last week, to do the next step of my mixing, just because I don't want to have to be out there with the shovel turning it when it's 100 degrees outside. But if you're looking to just like dive in and start exploring, there's a couple of great resources. There's a guy here on YouTube. His name is Chris Trump, and Trump like Trump, and he has a great, just like phenomenal amounts of material that covers like all of these bases and more than you ever want to know about it, or maybe exactly as much as you want to know about it. But I think that he's great. Thanks, John. I will buy more trees. You should pick which trees. Like, if you're going to be suggesting and super chatting me to buy more trees, like, tell me what trees I need to buy. Chris Trump is a great resource. Natural Farming Hawaii is another one. That's where I learned, was Eric Weinert. I think that he is a really great teacher. He breaks it down into a method that's very easy to follow. I know that he has some videos that dig into it here on YouTube, as well as I think it's just Google Natural Farming Hawaii, and you should be able to go from there. He has a manual that you can download, and sometimes they'll do like various classes and whatnot, so hit subscribe on all their stuff to stay in the loop. And basically it's a deep rabbit hole, and however far down that rabbit hole you want to go with Korean natural farming, like, it's possible. So but I'll also be, you know, figuring out what I think is worth pursuing in that space here over the following months, as soon as we get through this like really hot season where I'm just keeping things alive outside. No dirty socks, Mike. I already said this once. People on the internet, come on. I don't want dirty socks in my P.O. box. The post office is going to kick me out. Let's see. So if you do an avocado, one of the conversations that's happening in chat here right now is that an avocado from seed could take upwards of 10, 11 years to bear any fruit. That is absolutely true. The avocado that I have out in the woods right now is probably 3 years old, and it's all grafted material. I think that the guy I got it from probably grew those materials from seed, but I'm not there with avocado trees. Not at this point. You know, I'll grow a walnut that will take 18 years or whatever to fruit, but not an avocado. I don't know. Not everything you do makes sense. Not everything I do makes sense. Yeah, so exactly. If you graft it, it will reduce the fruit bearing time. That's kind of what I'm banking on, and hopefully I'm able to baby it enough that it will get to that point. We'll see. Winter gets cold and windy here, so. Hi everyone who is just joining. Let's see. What is something you want to grow that you haven't yet? I get this question a lot, and there's so much stuff in this space. Vanilla is always up there. It's always going to be up there. My dream is to just have vanilla that I'm able to keep alive year-round in the greenhouse, which is going to require some engineering in terms of like actual physical technical engineering for heat and cold and venting in that space, but also I think creating an environment where it would survive well. That's definitely way up there. Wasabi is another one. It's like all these plants that potentially won't grow in my climate. I'm thinking about trying to do wasabi in Washtub Creek over the winter just to see if I can. The starts for that are not cheap, but since I've already killed a couple of hops this year, like I figure, what the heck, like you gotta grow stuff to learn how to grow it, and I can't be not growing stuff because I'm afraid to kill it. So we're gonna get over that and see if I can get any rhizomes. One of the things that I grew this year that I'm waiting to cycle through another season and hoping it's still alive were French gray shallots, and that was something I've really wanted to grow for a while, and I finally got my hands on some seed, and those hopefully will do well and kind of become a perennial crop around here. So there's a long list of things though. I basically am just like online marking stuff down all day and writing it in my notebook as far as stuff I want to grow. Yeah. I don't know. None of these look like questions. Here we go. How do you repair and restore clay soil that's been tilled in the past? So that's actually what I'm working on with the fields. One of the things that I'm trying to figure out and trying to navigate mentally with that is deciding at what point do you want to disturb the soil to kickstart the cycles a little bit better, and at what point do you need to stop tilling and plant more seeds, and it will start, you know, functioning in that direction. I see a lot of no-till farmers still tilling, so I'm trying to navigate these waters effectively without disturbing the soil too much. I will say that having gone a season now without any tilling and only doing, you know, sort of a very crude broad fork with a lawn aerator, not really deep enough to aerate the compacted soil. But I will say that the soil when I'm digging out there, and especially in the rows where I've planted and done some amending, is looking a lot better, and it makes me really hesitant to till in order to get another cover crop on. So I still got to figure that one out. But I would say if you're looking to start repairing that clay soil, the best thing you can do is just start top dressing and adding layers of organic matter and mulch and just cover crops, like things that will help cover and protect that soil and get roots down into it to start getting that infiltration back in place, start getting the microorganisms and your worms and other subterranean insects to, you know, go in and help decompose roots as they die off. And so you'll start getting those air channels and water channels back in there. It does take time. You know, I think most of the farmers I've talked to that have converted to regenerative and no-till, they're looking at a minimum of 3 to 5 years, and we're trying to figure out, you know, how do we not so much shortcut, but kind of speed up that process without bringing in tons of amendments and upsetting the balance of the ecosystem and the soil food web. But yeah, it does take time, and it does take basically throwing everything you think you know about farming out the window and looking to see like what parts of this paradigm shift that you need to embrace make sense for the type of growing that you're doing. Yeah, that's where I'm at with that. I'm still trying to figure out, what my next move is, to be honest. Like, every day I'm like, okay, well, maybe we should test this out and disc this strip and see how it responds. And then I'm like, well, no, because it's dry and we'd have to irrigate and have to cover. And so just being considerate of your overall impact on the ecosystem, and not just above ground, but also below ground. I think that that's the right place to start when you're looking at repairing degraded land. One of the things I did too, and then I'll get off of this topic, but when I was in Los Angeles and I had my backyard garden with the raised beds, and they were solid packed clay. I mean, it was clay and it was rock, and couldn't even just like get a shovel in there, not even like a pickaxe. I did lasagna gardening, and so that was my sort of entry into no-dig gardening, and that's where you layer, cardboard and newspaper and alfalfa and straw and hay and compost and topsoil, and like I brought in lots of materials to make that happen. But by the time that I think it was 2 seasons had gone by, I was actually able to get into the clay layer. And not that I wanted to move that clay layer, but I was able to make it work for me as far as it helping to retain water. The roots would get down into it, and so then they had access to minerals. And it worked out really well. Like, that was a tough garden to leave. That was a really, really beautiful space, and I hope that someone's still taking care of it. Followed by, I don't even know. I'm going to go back to the wall here if none of these look like questions. Does no-dig work? Okay, so if you are on the fence about no-dig, then I would say Google soil food web and look at some of the stuff that, like some of the research or videos and content that Elaine Ingham's put out, the stuff that Alan Savory puts out, read, Dirt to Soil or Growing a Revolution, or like there's a whole list, The Soil Will Save Us. There's so much to support no-dig and so much to support no-till agriculture. And from a scientific perspective and looking at like the biology of soil, it totally makes sense. And when you start looking at tilling and the way that the Green Revolution transformed agriculture, not even like 100 years ago, but we can go back to like horse and plow as well. And these are not even my words. This is just like stuff from a lot of the stuff that I've read and watched and listened to. There's not really any scientific evidence on the biology side that supports tilling. Like, there's nothing as far as soil biology goes that says tilling makes this better. Tilling makes it easier for us to plant things, and it makes it easier for us to get rid of weeds and to disturb pest cycles, but it also brings up more weed seeds to the surface, and it also ultimately compacts a lot of soil types, especially if you have clay, because what you're doing is you're ruining that soil structure and disturbing a lot of the organisms that live in the soil. So you end up exacerbating a problem that didn't need to exist in the first place in order to get something quickly and efficiently, but it's not really efficient in the long run. We could go on and on about that all day, but I'd say definitely look into no-dig and look into especially like Google soil food web, because that I think is the most important component we've been missing, and it was something that wasn't even on my radar, to be honest, until like the last year or two. It was something that was kind of in the back of my mind. Like, I knew there were dots that I wasn't connecting, and that when I had more fungi that I was growing, that was when I started noticing like, oh, this ecosystem is responding better in the garden. So yeah, like definitely look into soil food web. And try and find, I urge and challenge anyone out there who's like, tilling is the best way to do it. Like, I like to find scientific evidence to prove that tilling is good for the soil, because I have yet to find any. And as long as that remains true, then I'm going to continue pursuing no-dig and try to disrupt my soil as little as possible, because I want to build it faster and I want healthier plants and a healthier ecosystem. Yeah. What other users do I recommend people follow here on YouTube? So there's a couple of people. I think that if you're looking, if you're looking for more no-dig stuff, Charles somebody help me out here in the comments. Charles, he's the no dig gardener. I can't think of his last name right this second for some reason. He's great. Charles Dowding, thank you, Anthony. I'm like, it starts with the D. I'm horrible with names. I'm so much better with faces. Not that that helps because I can't put their names to them. But yeah, Charles Dowding, he's great on the no dig side. Deanna Cat, she's Deanna Cat on Instagram, and she's Deanna, can't think of her last name either, here on YouTube. I think that she's great, covers like lots of really fantastic beginner stuff in ways that are easy to understand. She has a blog called Homestead and Chill, which is just packed with information. Yeah, James Prigoni is a great gardener on here as well. I definitely have learned some stuff from him. I'm trying to think who else I'd recommend. I'll have to think about that one a little more. I'm sure I'm just gonna like yell out a name here in a second as they pop up. Yeah, there's people too on in chat that are like actually super helpful when it comes to answering gardening questions all day long. But a lot of times they don't actually have a channel on here, which I don't blame them. I mean, the internet is like definitely it can take a lot of time to manage a channel, so but I'm glad that you guys show up and help out here in the comments and whatnot. That's great. Oh yeah, Never Sink Farm. That's a good one. Thank you, Mason. I definitely, Never Sink is like, I'm gonna take that class someday when I have that much cash. I think that what they're doing is pretty revolutionary, and they're doing a really good job. There's quite a few. There's honestly quite a few people on YouTube that are just. I'll have to do like maybe I'll have to do like a playlist or something. I think I can do that. So, and then point everyone in that direction as far as whatever you're looking for, because there's lots of information out there already, and so there's things I don't have to really cover because I feel like they're covering it well, and I can just send you there. Am I familiar with Chef Sean Brock and the story of how he helped bring Carolina gold rice and heritage plants back to South Carolina? I am. I saw that Chef's Table. But yeah, I've been following him even prior to that, and I only was bummed that I didn't get down to South Carolina at some point when I was on the East Coast for a while and go to eat at any of his spots. But yeah, I think that chefs do have a really important role to play in the food and the food system, the food that ends up on our plates, what's hot, like all of these things. And yeah, I think that he's doing really great work. He gets it. He strikes me as someone who definitely gets it. He's doing great work. I think Dan Barber is also doing really great work in this space as a chef. Working with breeders, looking at things from like a very holistic perspective as far as closing the loop on a farm. I think it definitely helps to have, a really big nonprofit and research space to partner up with, but that doesn't mean that, each individual can't make sure their actions are very focused and values driven. So I do like these stories of these chefs doing this work, because when I decided that it was more important for me to follow a farming path versus a chef path, I was really hoping that eventually I could find chefs to work with as a farmer that would support the same sorts of ethics and ideals. So it's very inspiring to see them popping up throughout the country, like as more people, and as the higher profile chefs, make more people aware of these things, for sure. Let's see. Who else? Yeah, so I agree, Chino, with the heritage crops and bringing them back. I mean, that's part of the reason I'm working with landrace seeds, is that it is a flavor thing. Like, a lot of it's a flavor thing, and one of the things, I was talking with someone last week about soil and soil biology and immunology, and the conversation got to a point where we were talking about, the latest research coming out of UCLA right now is that the human health and the nutrients, that's what it was, is the nutrients on our food, on our fruits and vegetables, is starting to get, like, from a study perspective, it's starting to get more closely related or more connected to the microbiology in the soil versus the variety of the crop. And so I think that when we talk about heritage crops, and we talk about terroir and where something has come from or how it tastes better grown here than there, like, a lot of that goes back to those soil microbes being partnered with those crops. And when you dig into land races, then they're partnered even further because they've been growing together in the same places, a lot of times, like, to a level of these crops being somewhat endemic for hundreds of years. And so yeah, that's gonna taste good if it's grown in, like, its home, so to speak, where it's was grown previously by lots of people. So I just think it's all really exciting. I don't know that the land race will adapt the same way here, or that the flavors will adapt the same way, but what I've tasted in this space, I mean, it sent me on a journey to clean seeds and sweep floors in the mountains of New Mexico because I had never had anything like it. So as someone who's constantly chasing flavor and knowing that, trust your nose and trust your mouth, and the better that something tastes, potentially the better it is for you, from nature, not, with the flavors added and whatever. But I like where it's going, and I like going down that rabbit hole. So I'm glad to see people taking interest in saving heritage seeds, because I don't know what we'd do without them, to be honest. I mean, we're down to a handful of companies owning most of the seed catalogs in the world, with few exceptions, and it's an uphill battle for most of us. But I think that if everyone takes a couple of seeds that they're willing to steward, then we'll get somewhere with it. I think it's a battle worth fighting. So joining the revolution over here. I'm talking for way too long, and then everything just like scrolls. That's an interesting tip, Josh, to use hair from someone who cuts hair around their garden to keep out the rabbits and squirrels. I've heard of that before. I think my grandmother used to do that. I haven't tried it, but the next time I cut my hair, I will, because I usually just scoop it up and throw it in the compost pile. But yeah, like, why not put it in the garden, somewhere where animals are eating my plants? I haven't had too much trouble with that, to be honest, but knock on wood, right? Like, we're kind of in that part of the season where they're starting to get a little desperate. So thank you, Scott. I will buy even more trees. So I was going to wait to tell you guys about where I'm getting trees from this year, or where I'm getting some trees from, because I wanted to make sure that I could get what I wanted. But I feel like sharing, so since I already have my list, and I'm not, I think that it's a more the merrier and spread out situation. So the Missouri Conservation, and this, Scott, was what you and John, with your tree donations, will be where I'm spending the tree donation money. Is thanks, Root Chino. I'm spending that too, and on my trees that I'm getting from the Missouri Conservation Society. And so they do lots of native trees, and they have a fair amount of edibles. And so these trees, I don't know what their shipping costs are yet. That's one of the things I'm not, like, I haven't heard of. And they're like between 25 cents and $1 a pop. It's insane. But it's part of like a conservation effort to get more people to plant natives. And there's a fair amount of edibles and medicinals in there that I'm definitely getting. So if you're looking to reforest an area, if you are, thanks, John. You're just gonna buy me a whole food forest by the time this chat's over. No, thank you guys. I really do appreciate it. So yeah, if you're looking to add some more trees to your property and you're going, oh, trees are so expensive, and you don't mind babying, young trees that are like a foot or two tall, what we generally call them whips, but it's just like, it is literally, you get a stick in the middle with some roots on it. But they grow pretty quickly. I have a few from this past year, and they're looking great. I think it's a good way to go about it. So it's the Missouri Conservation. Just put that into your Google. Their trees go on sale in September, and you can kind of look through it, see what's potentially would function in your area, what your soil and climate can support. Lots of other, like we have our local, the water department that's in the next city over, in the bigger city. They'll do a tree sale in the fall or in the spring as well, where it's like $2 or $4 a tree. So like I really encourage you to look to add in some natives that may or may not be fruiting, just to kind of, you know, give yourself a little bit more tree coverage. We're gonna need a lot of shade, I think, in the near future to grow more vegetables. Maybe not all of them, but it never hurts to have more tree coverage, right? So if it's something that you're looking for, there are resources out there so that you can get ones that are a little bit more affordable, more bang for your buck, and then grow a little forest in your yard. One of the things I've been looking at, and just kind of look through. So Joseph, wait, I'm going to stop for a second, because Pleury and Aprium trees are GMO. They're actually not. They are hybrids. And genetic modification and hybrids are totally different things. Oh, thanks, Tour Dog, for the tree bump. And you too, John, for the tree bump. I'm going to have all my trees covered by the end of this chat. It's so exciting. Or at least half of them. I'm planning on getting like 500 or more. I don't know how I'm going to dig that many holes yet. But back to that. So Pleury and Aprium are actually hybrids. They're not GMO. As far as I know, Dave Wilson has the market cornered on a lot of those, and they're also patented. But don't be afraid of hybrid plants. Just don't try to save the seeds and plant them unless you are looking for like a really long-term breeding project that might not result in anything delicious. I'm doing that with a few melons just to play around, but other than that, like, I would not be worried. I would not be concerned about growing. Like, I do have I have Aprium. I have what's called a natural hybrid, and so it's a black apricot, and I don't actually know how that works, a natural one versus a forced one, but I know that the genetic testing turns up as a combination of a plum and apricot. Supposedly it's more cold tolerant, which is why I'm growing it, because apricots are not supposed to work here well, although someone on Instagram told me they do, so who knows. But yeah, I would not be afraid to grow hybrids. I just would be careful about growing too many. Like, do try and do as much open pollinated and heirloom stuff as possible, because there are varieties that are being lost at an astounding rate, and the more of those that more of us can grow, the better chance we have of them existing in the future. So let's see. So the trees that are from the Missouri Conservation are typically native to Missouri, because that's where they're being grown. But some of them also are native to Texas. So what I do is I've gone down the list. I've written down the ones I know I want, as well as the ones that are questionable that I'm looking into. And then I'll go through on, I want to say that it might be like the Natural Resources Conservation site, where it has a map where you can, you know, punch in. I basically just Google each species, and then I'll Google each species plus Texas. And then if it comes up as functional, then I'll be like, okay, add that to my list. And if it comes up as like, this might not work where you're at, you know, because the map will have like it filled in where it occurs naturally, then if it's not filled in that space, then I'm like, okay, it's questionable. If it is filled in, then I'm like, yeah, I'll add that. I'm not super worried about them being grown in Missouri instead of Texas, but there are some, like some of the oaks, potentially pecans, a few others that if I can get them in Texas for close to the same price, then I will. I just found out that I kind of figured through process of elimination that the person that I had got a few of these trees from last year that was in Texas, who did a group buy, based on the species they were selling at a slightly marked up rate, that it was from the Missouri Conservation. Like, there was nowhere else that was selling them. So those ones are doing well. I would say one of the things I'm looking at is making sure that there's not any instances of issues like sudden oak death syndrome, various tree diseases, because I don't want anything kind of crossing borders if it doesn't need to. But so far I've been happy with the trees that I have. So that's what I'm looking at right now. I would say do as much research as possible if you're buying from a conservation society that's out of state, because the last thing that you want is to end up with a bunch of stuff that won't grow where you live. Have I used genetically modified plants? No, I haven't. Not well. One, I don't have like that's a money situation, right? Is genetically modified plants cost you quite a bit of money. You generally have to grow a lot of a plant that is genetically modified in order to have that contract in the first place. Like we were talking acres and acres of corn or soy or cotton. That's definitely a big scale thing. There's very few. I'm not sure I can think of any that you could like walk into a nursery and buy either seeds or plants for, and that's very intentional on the part of the companies that sell that seed. They don't want it, like if you have it out in the hands of a bunch of just regular gardeners, then it's much harder to control and regulate and hunt down and test and sue anyone who's saving and regrowing those seeds. So I don't have any desire to grow genetically modified, like laboratory modified. There's going to be people who make their arguments for hybrids and cross-pollinating whatever being genetically modified. No, we're talking about changing the genes in a lab, and I don't have any desire or reason to be honest. Most genetic modifications that exist in the market right now are done to make the plant more tolerant to herbicide, and herbicide is not something that I use. So, or more tolerant to insecticide, and that's also something that I don't use. So I'm not particularly worried about it. It's not something that I will be delving into anytime soon. I'm pretty sure I'll do hydroponics long before I would even think about doing, genetic modification tests. So awesome, Jesse, that you have loquats. My dad has a loquat out in the front yard, and the house blocks the north wind, and it's just a baby. It's probably like not even as tall as me. I'd say like 4 feet, but I'm hoping that it will get some growth on it. If you have any tips for growing loquats in Central Texas or North Texas, let me know. Other than the cold situation, I'm not really sure. It's the first time that I've had one that I'm growing, so but yeah, it's doing well. So yeah, what's my thanks for joining Food Forest Permaculture. I'm glad you were able to stick around for as long as you did. I just realized it's like 1:30. We'll go and finish a couple of these questions, and I still have a few behind me and a few silly ones there. But I'm going to look at this and see. So opinion on biochar. Dale, my opinion on biochar is that it is something that I will be digging into shortly. I'm actually planning a video in which I light a pile of stuff on fire. And I just hadn't gotten around to restacking it yet. And now with all the snakes that are showing up, we're having a bunch of copperheads just come out of nowhere all over this neighborhood right now. It's just that time of year. And so I'm a little hesitant to go digging in a pile of sticks. But I will be making some biochar. My opinion on it is that I need to be very careful with it, because biochar is still charcoal. And in its raw state, even if you burn it all right, and once you have the cooled off charcoal, it's still alkaline. And we have alkaline soil here. Our soil is at 8, so I don't want to further alkalinize the soil here. That being said, there are methods to charge your biochar with microbes and with nutrients and everything else in a compost pile, which tends to have lots of humic acid, which will help bring that pH down, hypothetically. So getting more acidic elements into that to make it a more neutral, so that you can add it to either your amendments or work it into your land and start building up that soil. I do think that biochar can make soil really high functioning. It gives microbes and various things that live in the soil a nice place to hang out. It can help with just like general retention, and so I definitely want to incorporate it. It's hard to get a good, clear answer on how it would affect my overall pH, and so that's something that I'm really I'm moving into that question very strategically, just because I don't want to keep pushing my pH into the alkaline space, because if it gets to a point beyond where it's at now, then it gets into a danger zone where some nutrients are not available and things won't grow. So being very, very careful with that. But yeah, there's lots of people who are big biochar fans, and I am on board with you guys. I just think that, like, if you have really acidic soil, could be awesome. If you have really alkaline soil, then I think that having a very prudent sort of approach to using it and understanding how to, get it. Basically, I'm looking at it like it's a partially composted versus fully composted situation. That's not the right way to frame it, I know, but this charging idea where you have life living in the biochar and helping that create a more neutral pH so that you're not ruining your soil. Please correct me if that is just like way off. But food forest permaculture, I agree that it will give the land balance, and that's something that we're looking for here. I know that it does help with soil stability. Paging Samuel L. Jackson, snakes in a garden. Collie, I know, there was a snake this morning. The only reason, it was a big copperhead, probably 3 feet. I didn't take a picture. I was busy helping make sure that it got killed and put in the compost pile, just because it was in the front yard, the dogs were barking at it. And the only reason we were able to get it was because it tried to eat a bullfrog that was the size of my coffee cup, and it couldn't get its mouth all the way around. So we were able to get it. I felt really bad for it, but that's an $800 vet bill, or even more if it bites one of us. So the non-venomous snakes, we'll let them live. And there's actually a 4.5-foot water snake, a plain belly water snake that lives under the front porch that I'm just let it go. That one's a friend. But this one, it was just, pit vipers, you don't want them hanging out. So it's unfortunate. If they're out in the woods, totally fine. And I try and work around, you just deal with them when we see them. But if they're in main thoroughfares, it can be a little bit more dangerous. And I'm sure the neighbors wouldn't appreciate me just being unleash the snakes. So thanks for joining when you could. 3, 2, 1, Aussie. It's always good to see you guys pop in, see the same names and faces, no faces, but avatars every week. I definitely agree on not using insecticides, MP. It's one of those things where not using them wherever you can help it. So I'll be honest, we do use some insecticides in shed spaces, sometimes around the house, under the house, because it is a pier and beam house, and we have major black widow issues around here. So we've cut back. I've managed to get my dad to cut back on the amount of stuff that gets sprayed, and we're finding a balance as far as what gets sprayed versus what doesn't. But anything that's super dangerous, and that if it's showing up in mass, sometimes it's hard to avoid. That being said, in garden spaces, absolutely not. There's no spraying happening out there. It just throws off the natural balance too much. And a lot of times you'll see things you'll see a ton of aphids show up, and then 2 days later, a bunch of lacewing or lady beetle or other larvae that's a beneficial insect will hatch. And if they're eating a couple hundred of those a day in order to grow, it doesn't make sense to kill off their food, because then they're going to go somewhere else to look for more food. And then their food will continue to exist, the ones that you miss, and you just create a bigger problem for yourself. So I like to sit back and let nature take its course, and for the most part it works. It doesn't work on those dang stink bugs, but everyone else is usually the beneficials will prey on everything. Sticky traps, actually, Ralph, would be a great idea for black widows, maybe. I get worried that lizards and frogs and stuff might get stuck in them, but maybe there's something out there I haven't found yet for those particular spiders. I do, that's part of the reason that I like to leave paper wasps, is because mud daubers will supposedly eat black widows, and that's one of their snacks. So I can do integrated pest management without having to add or buy anything, that's the direction I try to go, and I really try and steward wasps as a beneficial insect, even though most people are afraid of them. Yeah. So, okay, there's a few more behind me, and then I think that we're going to roll out here soon, unless anyone has more questions. Thank you, Mike, for not mailing me dirty socks. I really appreciate it. I want the post office to let me keep a P.O. box as long as possible, and I think if it smells funny or moves too much, then they're going to be like, oh my gosh, why did we give her a box? And maybe not let me resubscribe. But I'm paid up for 6 months, so they got to tolerate it for at least that long. That's actually not a bad idea, Loam Slice, if someone wants to relocate venomous snakes in my area. You know, pop me a DM on Instagram at FlavorKit, and I will keep your number on speed dial. If you're in like the, you know, Bridgeport area of Texas, then yeah, like pop in. But it's kind of difficult to, I guess I'll have to learn how to catch them. I mean, if there's someone who actually does that sort of stuff. But for the most part, I don't run into way too many. Especially since we got the dump part of the property cleaned out, and there's not rolls of carpet and stuff, they tend to hide in piles like that. So this was just they're kind of showing up, you know. Let's see, what are plants that you can grow indoors over the winter season? So I'm assuming this question is about edible plants. And one of the things that I keep indoors, or I've kept indoors when I don't have outdoor space for them in winter, are just a lot of herbs. So that would probably be where I would start. If you have peppers that you want to overwinter, those are nice to have inside. They'll do better inside than in your garage a lot of times. They tend to get a little cold and all the leaves will fall off, as some of you might have experienced this past winter trying to overwinter them outside. But yeah, I do lots of herbs, and I think that really helps when you're dealing with, as it gets cold and the days are shorter, and you know, you get the seasonal affective disorder going because you're not getting enough sunshine and outdoor time. Just having things that you can work with and smell and touch and taste, as far as culinary herbs that you can work into your meals when the local produce may be a lot of, you know, heavier, starchier storage sort of vegetables if you're eating really local. It really helps to add some brightness and flavor in terms of just like your overall experience throughout the wintertime and those months. I would definitely start there. I would be growing things, you know, like parsley or like thyme, or, you know, maybe even oregano, or like things that you would actually cook with. Make sure that you're picking things that you would eat and that you like the flavor of. But like play in that space if you're looking to grow some stuff indoors. Basil might do all right. I've definitely dealt with basil in the winter. Cilantro does okay. I mean, basically mint, like a lot of the different herbs. And I might, you know, you could play with rosemary and lavender, that sort of stuff. They tend to like a little more heat. They don't love being in pots, but it's doable. So working, start in that space and then branching out from there. You can do microgreens, you can do sprouts. Like there's a lot of things that you could do in a windowsill just to kind of keep that itching to play in the soil at bay, or play in the soil inside of your house. Yeah, it's good, Jesse, that you never use chemicals in your fields or gardens. I haven't seen anything that really points to it being a long-term effective solution. And until I find, you know, anything that says otherwise, like I don't see a point in spending money on something that is going to kill things in a really broad spectrum fashion without being as targeted as I would like it to be, and without looking at it from like a long-term perspective. So I just don't like spending the money. If I don't have to, then I'm not going to. But it also, like, yeah, it disrupts the ecosystem in a way that takes a while to get back into balance. So I applaud you for that. Oh no, Dale, why did you damage your peppers? I didn't see, you might have had a comment up earlier. Let me know what happened. So, thanks guys for popping in. Loyal, so you're new to my channel and you're wondering what type of content I'm filming. So, the type of content that I'm filming is, it's a lot of experiments that I'm doing in the garden space that I'm working with right now. So I'll back up. Prior to, I moved at the beginning of the year to North Texas, and I'm starting a farm from scratch here on about 5 acres of land. Only 1 acre is really arable, and that's, you know, being generous because it's a heavily compacted clay that's been tilled quite a bit. And then the other 4 acres are forest, and the goal is to dig into agroforestry from both sides. So part of it is looking at an existing forest and how we can work with that and add to it and support the functions of that ecosystem while growing food in that space. And part of it is building a forest from the ground up. So figuring out, how to do like water retention and direction in a field, how to build soil on top of, degraded, compacted soil, working with that, working with native plants, adding a lot of trees. And so regardless of, what approach you're coming from as far as like what your land looks like, I mean, my goal is to kind of walk through the various experiments that I'm doing and hopefully inspire others to look at the space where they're growing a little bit differently and maybe incorporate some of the things that I found to work, or give me feedback on things I found that didn't work, but I was still wanting to share them. So it's kind of, if you look at it more as like garden vlogging in a sense, I mean, there's a little bit of how-to, a little instructional, a little, these are things that work for me. It's by no means like an expert account. I think that there's been some confusion, at least for some people in the comment section, as far as like, that's not a very expert way to approach it. And like, that's not the goal here. I mean, I think that there's a lot of people who are poised as experts on YouTube and across the internet who are doing a fantastic job of that and making things really accessible and approaching it in very textbook ways. And I think that that's great and it's a good way to learn. But I also think that it's good to experiment and learn sort of a process as far as problem solving, what you're looking for and why, like figuring out how to work backwards on method to madness. And that's kind of what I'm here for. So thanks for joining. I'm going to see, oh my gosh, what's the best way to move a 5-foot rose bush so I can plant a dragon fruit plant? Camilo, I would say if you're trying to transplant a 5-foot rose bush, what I would do, and hopefully it survives, but what I would do is I'd water it really well first off, like water it really, really, really well. You're going to want to be able to get a garden spade, or is it a spade? It's a fork. It's the one with the 4 tines, if you have one of those, versus a shovel. I highly recommend transplanting with a fork instead, but you're going to want to be able to get that all the way down into the soil so that you're able to lift it from the root ball. Depending on how, I mean, are you saying it's 5 feet tall or 5 feet wide? I mean, depending on where that sizing is, what I would do is I would go through and I'd prune it quite a bit so that you can move it. And then either get some burlap or an old comforter, definitely like long sleeves, heavy gloves, maybe a jumpsuit, maybe like armor, I don't know. And then you're going to have to basically get that root ball out once the ground is saturated enough and you can move it with the fork, to wrap the remaining rose bush in something that you're able to, the thorns won't come through and slice you, and then get that root ball out with the fork, and then have the transplanted hole wherever it's going prepped and ready to go. You want it watered, you want the soil that's going into to be a similar moisture content, you want to make sure that there's food. I'm sure that there's lots of rose growers out there that would have better tips than that, but this is like my general transplanting tips, and I really wish that I had done it with the tomatillos that I transplanted yesterday, to be honest, because they don't even look like they know they moved. Like I checked them this morning and there's like no wilting, no nothing. So I'm starting to get this transplant method down pretty well, I think. And maybe there'll be some stuff that I move in the near future that I'm able to share here. Because I think that there's a lot of things that can go wrong and they don't need to. So hopefully that helps kind of move you in a direction on that one. Definitely looking at getting runner ducks, whoever said that. I can't see the comment anymore, but I like the runner ducks. I like the way that they move. They look like they should have arms though, like flapping out when they're running forwards like they do. Zion Gardner, thank you for joining. Yeah, I think that, yeah, there are a lot of experts in the space, or people who poise themselves as experts. Not so much now, especially as we get more in, like, my bubble is regenerative. I don't pay, oh, that's not true. I get some news from like the big ag companies just to see like how they're positioning themselves so that I can figure out what we're up against. But there are definitely experts out there who it's been a, add NPK, it's been use this to combat this. And I think the more that we learn to work with our surroundings and with our environment, we should be cooperative. Like that's the whole point here, is like to learn how to cooperate with each other, with our environment, versus fighting constantly, because fighting has gotten us nowhere. I think that we're seeing the results of that, And so it's like, what's it? It's the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And that's exactly what's happening with agriculture. So it's like, okay, well, if the results are not there anymore and they're only getting worse, like, let's find something different. Let's see what we can do in this space to make it work better, because this isn't working. So there has to be something else. So I will probably never, even after like 50 years of gardening, if that happens, I will never poise myself as an expert or position myself as an expert, but I always want to be the student, you know? Like, I think that that's the right way to approach this stuff, for sure. So, soil temp important to be similar as well. Yeah, Ruchino, I think that, are you talking for transplanting and soil temperature? I would say that it's somewhat important, yeah. But I think that the most important thing is definitely moisture, and then from there, like composition and temperature. I definitely try to water things really well 2 days before I'm transplanting, and then I will do it an hour or two before sunset. It's not something I do at the beginning of the day. It will let them kind of settle in overnight, and I think that that helps a lot. And then I also will make sure that I'm putting some level of compost or mycorrhizal fungi or something that has biology in it at the bottom of the transplant hole to associate with those roots as quickly as possible, and then also mulching down the top of the soil after planting and then watering it all really well. You want the plant to just sense that it's getting watered, not that it's moved, 100 feet or 200 feet or 500 feet from where it was before. So hopefully that sort of makes sense. Again, I did a little thing in stories, but I should have documented more of it. I was just trying to get so much done yesterday. Because yeah, I will be, sorry, it is long, Scott. We're going to head out here soon. I know I said that like 20 minutes ago. Like, you hang up first. No, I'm trying to, I was trying to get a lot done yesterday because I will be gone next weekend, but I will be at a farm conference. I will hopefully be covering some stuff there, either for YouTube, but it'll definitely be on Instagram, Patreon, Facebook. Maybe pull something together for YouTube if I don't get crowd shy, which tends to happen, but maybe I'll get a little crazy. I don't know. We'll see. But Loyal, yeah, I do a Q&A just about every Sunday. I think I'm looking at 3 Sundays a month. I think it's good to give my mods, and let's be honest, myself, off at least 1 Sunday a month just to have the flexibility at this time of day. But I'm going to get a schedule up here shortly, and we're looking at the 1st and 3rd and 4th Sundays of the month currently. So it'll either be 2 or 3 Sundays, but I'm looking at 3 because I'm crazy. I don't pay attention to magnetic orientation while I'm transplanting, no. Should I? Should I be paying attention to Pharmacy Seeds Network? Let me know. It's not, I pay attention to, I don't know actually. That's a very good question though. Like, I don't think about if I've turned the plant to be in a different direction than it was in prior. Yeah, it's some in ways they seem, the way that they seem happiest, but that's actually a good point, that if it's gotten used to, and you'll see this because you have plants, right, that will follow the sun, and so you'll see them facing the sun, and then they kind of do this, like flowers, throughout the day, and then they'll be facing in the other direction. I see like beans and squash leaves and various plants will do it, especially if they don't have full sun all day, even if they do sometimes. And so that makes sense that if you're changing it up and they're like, whoa, wait a second. So, good call. Yeah, I'll have to pay attention to that. Thank you. So, let's see. Oh wait, I still have Post-its, huh? Oh, these are ridiculous. This one says, how are you? I think that was from Phyto Alchemist. I don't even think that he's here today. Leo, if you're here, shout out. But if he's not, I don't know that he popped in today. He has university starting again soon. This silly questions sometimes on Instagram. How are you? I'm good today. It's been tough the last couple of weeks. It's been hot. Things are dying. I think you get into this like struggle, especially its first year. It's comparing yourself with other gardeners that have been doing the same yard for years, and it's just like, thank you, Lisa, for putting some money in the tree fund. I really appreciate that. I'm so happy to have you here with me on this journey as well. And I am very excited. I am hoping to, I think the neighbor has an auger that I might be able to use to plant. I'm also looking at, I can't think of, I say this a lot, right? I can't think of the name of it right now. But there's these biodegradable watering containers that I found on Facebook or Instagram. They started advertising to me. I meant to email them last week and I forgot. I gotta make myself a note. But apparently you plant the tree in the middle of it and then you fill the basin with water and then that waters it throughout the season. And so while I am planning earthworks for the trees that you guys are helping me buy, yeah, they're like tree buckets, but they're biodegradable ones. And so while I am planning earthworks for the trees you guys are helping me buy, I like that idea because it would potentially help it survive through the summer without me having to have actual irrigation installed. But we're weighing pros and cons. I don't know how much they're going to cost at this point. I know the ones that are not biodegradable and reusable are like 20, 25, 30 bucks a pop, and that's just not going to happen with 500 trees or more. So we'll see. We'll see how that works out. But I definitely appreciate having that you guys are supportive and contributing to my tree fund, because it really is my tree fund and my cover crop fund. It's not, you know, going anywhere else. That is what it's for. So that's where we're going. It's always fun. So this is something, it's like I get these sorts of questions all the time and I just skip them. Can you read that? It says, why are you so hot? It's because it's 100 degrees in Texas. Well, you'd be hot too. But seriously, I hope that you guys are coming for the, what is it? Coming for the movie, staying for the popcorn, or coming for the popcorn, staying for the movie. It's one of those. Yeah, I appreciate whatever brings you here to hang out and learn with us. And hopefully you pick up some stuff, just ideas and whatnot that make you want to grow in all of the ways. In, you know, whether you're growing plants, growing as a person, growing as a part of this community. Like, happy to have you here, whatever brought you here, and hopefully you'll stick around for beyond the previews, right? So, do I have a water source? So, Pharmacy Seed Network, that is definitely something that I found that I'm going to need to address before this next season. Initially, I was thinking, oh, if I just build plenty of biology into the soil, it will take care of itself. August is starting to show me that's not the case with the field. And so moving forward, we're definitely looking at getting some level of just irrigation in place. I am looking at getting lots of IBC totes to do rainwater harvesting and then potentially flood irrigation. Some level of modified earthworks, and there may be some sort of mechanical irrigation to worst case scenario going into the field, but it is going to, it's one of those things that's going to take some time and some money and some thought. I'd like to do it without having like full-blown mechanical irrigation in place, just because that's not without its problems and you tend to be fixing it more often than you would just drag a hose around watering. But I'm really hoping that as we get the soil built, as we get more tree coverage in place, and as we get more biology in place, that irrigation will become less of a concern. That's good to know that a ram pump is a good thing for water. One of the things is that there's a pond at the downhill slope of this field, and so if you have resources that you think would be helpful in this space, please leave them in the normal comments, not the chat comments, because I don't know what happens to those after this. Like, I can never find them. But yeah, leave them in the normal comments, any sort of like links and whatever. Sometimes it goes through filtered, but I'll look through and see if I can't. I'd like to learn in that space as far as figuring out the water situation, because I've been dragging a hose around and now I'm just transplanting stuff out and letting everything else go to seed. Loyal, it's up to you to decide to subscribe if you want to subscribe. I think we have a good, I think we have a really good community growing here. And I think that if you're into problem solving and critical thinking, this is a fun place to hang out. Yeah, stick around. See if it jives with you. I know that everyone has different learning styles, and I'm very grateful that people find that I resonate as a learning style with some people. But there's lots of great teachers out there. So if I don't, like, happy to recommend some. I made a few recommendations earlier in this video as well. So yeah. Thank you, Pharmacy Seeds Network. I will definitely ask in your comments. I haven't had the bandwidth, just trying to figure out what's going on here in general in life, but also farming. I haven't really had the bandwidth, literally only like 3 weeks now with good internet, to watch other people's channels, but I'm hoping now that it's a little bit faster, that I'm able to kind of, you know, bookmark a bunch of videos and I can sit down and watch them whenever I have time or it's too hot. Yeah, that would be great, just to have more people around here to work with, for sure. I feel like we've answered this one before. If you could grow one plant for the rest of your life and only one, I don't know. I don't even know. Because it's like, it probably wouldn't be edible. I'd grow jasmine. I would grow the Grand Duke of Tuscany jasmine because it smells awesome like gardenias. Definitely not an edible as far as I know. Like, I couldn't survive on it at least, but they are beautiful, beautiful flowers. And that's like if I could grow it well. Yeah, sick of dragging the hose around for sure, kale flower. That's why I started with the bottle watering in the woods. I've spent a little too much money on irrigation parts this past week for various gardens, mostly the nursery, to be honest. I'm doing that entire space so that it can be a plug-and-play irrigation system, partially for my benefit, but mostly for my dad's benefit. If I'm out of town and he needs to hand water the amount of things that I hand water, I don't know that that's gonna happen. It's a lot to ask, and I'm home and able to do it. So yeah, it's, you know, plugging in lots of irrigation, it does add up quickly. I was fortunate enough to already have emitters, so I'm just getting the connectors and whatnot. But yeah, watering is a pain. I mean, that's why we're working on building soil too, right? Is that healthier soil with more diversity of biology is actually able to retain water a lot longer and a lot more efficiently and effectively. So part of digging into, you know, why we add compost instead of fertilizer and why we add worm castings instead of, you know, whatever. It's like we're adding these components. It's not just for the food source. It's also to help build that soil and build the soil biology and give all of these, you know, microbes and bacteria and stuff places to live. And so, yeah, like that's part of addressing the watering is building soil, for sure. Brown spotting on tomato seedlings. We'll take a few more questions and then we're going to get out of here because I'm realizing this is like an hour and a half again. But I like talking with you guys, so, you know, head out whenever you need to. Brown spotting on tomato seedlings. Why are they browning and how to prevent? Well, Sovereign Tyndall, hopefully some people in the comments can help you. It can be a number of things. It's really hard to address without a picture. Hopefully it's not blight. I mean, I would Google that and see. I get some browning on mine sometimes, although it tends to be on the edges of the leaves because it's just uneven watering. But if it's actually blotching, then you might want to look at tomato diseases. I hate having to tell you that, but see if anyone else gives you better information, but hopefully it's not, you know, a bacterial situation. I hope not. Kale flower, you grow kale for the rest of your life. Is that why you have that screen name? I think kale is actually good. It's a fun thing to grow. I like it when you can get them, when you keep harvesting the lower leaves and you end up with this like 6-foot palm tree and everyone's like, oh, what's that? And you're like, it's kale. Of course. But it's like, just this massive, I think that's so fun. Usually they fall over before they get that tall, but it's fun when that works out. So, yeah. Quick hour and a half. Would I rather be able to talk to animals or read people's minds? Well, I already do both, so I need a better question. No, I would say probably talk to animals. I feel like reading people's minds would be exhausting, but it would be nice, you know, if I wasn't making up half the conversation when I talk to my doggos. Sometimes I feel like that might not actually be what they're saying and it's just what I want them to say. And it would be, yeah, I think that I'd like to be able to talk to them. I definitely wouldn't want to read their minds because they would just be nonstop like, I wish I could have more food right now. So we're gonna go with talking to animals. It's okay, UK, here we grow. Late to the party is better than never. I can't, MP, I cannot take a break and then come back for another hour, but maybe I've been working on a time lapse doing that, which is hilarious because it's just me trying to break rock with a shovel. But maybe I'll keep shooting that sort of stuff and then pop that up at some point. And the water for community in Los Angeles. Yeah, so helping, shout out LA Kaleflower, that's where you're at. Building soil and the mentalities around building soil is definitely a tough space to share firsthand when you're just like in conversation. It's something that I've struggled with in conversation with my dad as well as other people. Like figuring out how to express the things that you've learned about it, and especially if you don't have all the terminology or the scientific background, it can be very difficult and frustrating, and a lot of times people tune out. The best thing that I can suggest is to find video content, like outside sources, certainly Netflix. There was one, I think it's called Sustainable, was the documentary I had in my queue earlier that my dad decided to turn on, and he's like, these guys are doing what you're talking about with soil. And so finding stuff that's edutainment, you know, it's educational, it's entertaining to share with people, and not kind of making them feel like, well, this is their choice to click play, to click watch. Maybe having, you know, like a movie night or something where you're on, you know, watching this and you'd be like, hey, we're movie night, BYOB, snacks, or, you know, potluck it, and then playing those sorts of things where it actually is an enjoyable watch, and saying like, we're talking about food, we're talking about gardening. If the people that you're working with are not, you know, it's not connecting, they're not grokking that space, plant those seeds. Like, go about doing it where you make it fun and it's not a lecture. One of the mistakes that I tend to make, and I'm sure that a lot of us in regenerative are a little guilty of this, is that we start kind of talking about stuff and then it feels like a lecture. It's not as exciting. We're like focused on all of the bad stuff, as far as like, well, if we don't do this, then these are all the bad things. It's like, well, no, if we're doing this, this is what we're getting. This is why it's good. So making it positive, making the conversation regenerative, making it entertaining, like that would be, you know, it takes time. I've been again chipping away at that rock with the shovel metaphorically for months, and just starting to see like, okay, we can be on the same page in this space. Clearly I'm not explaining something well, and maybe it's because I shouldn't be explaining it. Maybe I should be using someone else to explain it. Making it a discovery process. I think if it's not being force-fed in a curriculum style, and if it feels like it's more just, oh, did you know about this? And it's like, well, yeah, okay, now we can have a conversation. Like, that is the best way to approach this. It's very difficult for a lot of people to digest, I think, because it is scary. When you get into like the nuts and bolts of it and what we're up against as far as water and soil, like it can be intimidating, it can be depressing. And so being prepared to offer those solutions and practices once people have the information and once they're excited about the potential for soil building and for water conservation, like that's really where we're going to win in this space. So what did I just miss? I don't know. Okay, so Advancing Eco Agriculture's channel has been recommended, so I'm going to be checking that out. I think that you're not the first person to recommend that, Pharmacy Seed Network, so I will definitely add that to my list. I might actually have, I might be subscribed to them, but I haven't been going through YouTube videos lately. I really need to try. So, yeah, let's see. I think that we're going to, I think that we're going to wrap this up. I know there's probably some more questions hiding in those comments, but there's just like, exactly, feed the soil, and the soil will feed the plants, and the plants will care for themselves. Yeah, I think we're going to wrap this up. But thank you everyone for joining today. If you have more questions, please leave them in the normal comments, in the comments below, and I'll try and get around to some of them. Some might get added to the next live Q&A. I'm always writing post-its when I get questions from people so that we can share the answers together versus it being just like a one-on-one conversation. If you want the one-on-one conversations, please join me on Patreon at Veronica Flores. That's a great way to get those questions answered very quickly. And there was something else I was going to say. Oh yeah, if you're not on Instagram, or if you're not following me on Instagram, get over to Instagram at FlavorKit. I'm going to be posting updates from the farm conference that I'll be at next week. We will not be doing, that was what I was going to say. We will not be doing a live Sunday Q&A next week because I will not be here. I will be off farm learning about all of the stuff that I want to know about. But hopefully you will join me the following week, and I'm sure there's going to be lots of cool, interesting new stuff to chat about and talk about. And if you want to know when the live situations are happening or when the premieres are happening, make sure that you hit that subscribe button and ding that bell, and make sure that it says show notifications, and it will let you know every single time. Otherwise, just be ready for the 12 noon Central Standard Time most Sundays, apparently. So we'll do this as long as it's cool and fun. But thanks, guys. Thank you so much for joining. I always appreciate the amount of people that show up for this, and it's always a pleasure. So until next time, happy gardening. Bye. Thanks. Oh. Yeah, stop streaming. Okay. Bye.